Is about to begin. If everybody can filter in, we're going to get started. Yeah. David, could you go out and tell people to get seated? Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay. Do you? Just grabbing my. Rebecca, can you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yay. Thank you.
Okay, great.
I'm using this one because this is not working. Oh, great. Okay.
We had no instruction whatsoever.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay.
It was our fault.
No, that's okay. I just.
But what do you want? You got handheld?
Yeah,
Or
if
you want two handheld?
if you could turn this on, that would be
But
great.
you can't use that mic within 10 feet
I
of that.
will. I'll turn it on. I mean, I'll put it away. Yeah. I just didn't know because I just wanted to get started.
The one that David has.
Yeah, but that's the one that's in the hand.
Okay,
He
great.
has another one. I thought it was.
You want two handheld mics.
So just one would be fine because David's going to need to walk around with it.
We'll talk from there.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much. I just wasn't sure if you were still around and if we were just trying to make do.
Found out.
You can't be standing here.
I will move. I will put this back. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Hey, Rebecca.
Yes?
I still need to answer about slide 1. Do you want me to do that based on what I sent you, or are you going to do that one?
You can do it. Go ahead. You're there.
All right, thank you. Okay. Hello, testing. Sounds good. Okay, great. Okay. Well, all right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Okay. All right. So, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. So I'm going to go ahead and open and thank you all for being here and getting this work started. I really appreciate all of you coming together for this. I want to thank each of you for being here today, and for those who will attend our upcoming budget town halls, let's mark our calendars. Our next sessions are on October 23rd at 7 p.m., November 5th after service, and November 6th at 7 p.m. These sessions are your chance to be a part of the financial planning process. They're the settings where you can voice your concerns, ask questions, and give us valuable feedback. Please encourage others in the community to attend one of these important meetings to better understand the process and ask questions prior to the congregational meeting. We have a lot to get through in this meeting, and I'm sure there will be questions, so please take notes and hold all questions until the end. I promise there will be time to answer everything. Slide 2, please. Somebody. Moving on, I'd like to acknowledge the backbone of our community, our staff. Each individual contributes something unique and valuable to our church community. Their insights and dedication are crucial components to getting us to where we aspire to be. On the next slide, I'd like to talk about who worked on the budget. We take a highly collaborative approach to budget planning. I'm proud to say that the Budget Committee has worked in collaboration with multiple entities, from our Board of Trustees and the staff leadership team to the financial stewardship and finance teams. We've even had insights from our core and ministry teams as well as UUA staff. This is an extensive process with multiple rounds of reviews and inputs. Your voices today join a chorus of thoughtful contributors, and I want to emphasize that this budget is a product of collective wisdom. Finally, I'd like to talk about the budget timeline. Let's take a look at our timeline. We've kicked things off in August with initial meetings and hard data analyses. September was all about creating multiple drafts and collecting diverse inputs. In October and November, these budget town halls are scheduled for your involvement and to help us finalize the drafts. In December, we will have our congregational vote, which gives each of you the power to approve the final budget. To sum it up, the budget is not just numbers on a spreadsheet. It's a reflection of our values, our vision, and our collective future. Your participation makes it comprehensive, inclusive, and most importantly, representative of who we are as a community. Thank you for being an active part of this crucial process. I'm now going to pass the mic on to Jerry.
Good morning. So the first slide here talks about just what our operating budget is. It seems like it would be pretty self-evident, but money comes in, money goes out. And that incoming money is from all of us through our pledges and donations, through the hardworking staff who helps facilitate a number of rental opportunities, through the payments from various events, some from the endowment, some from the auction, which we thank all those that both organize the auction and those that come and buy fun events, and also from legacy gifts and bequests. Outgoing money, the biggest chunk, is salaries and benefits to take care of the staff that works so hard. All of the bills, the water and the electricity and fixing things and keeping everything the way it should be. Our programs, our mortgage, which still has a few more years to go, and our fair share for UUA dues, and some extra little, well, maybe not little, but some extra expenses as well. So our 2024 budget, get my slides organized here. So for 2023, the budget, this is our first year, this year, that we have a January to December budget. So that was approved by the congregation in last December. The approved endowment draw for this year was $75,500. Those funds have been withdrawn. Our UUA fair share is $45,000. All of the staff for this year received their COLA increase of 5%. And this year we were helped out a great deal with a $100,000 bequest that arrived early in the year, sadly due to someone's passing. Our 2024 budget is, at this moment, balanced. And it's balanced with the minimum endowment budget draw. The endowment was originally set up that the approximate 3.5% gain averaged out over the years would be acceptable for draw, and that's what we have budgeted for next year. This is a significant decrease from the last few years, from 90,000, almost 91,000 in 2022, and our 75.5 for 2023. So we're working really hard to minimize that. We're hoping for member pledges to increase by at least 5%. We're adding a line this year in our budget for legacy giving. Our rental income is strong, and we hope to do, Reverend Maria Christina wants to do a lot more weddings. So we're saying next year is our love year. And next we have David.
All right, good morning, everybody. All right, we are now on, slide 7, equitable compensation. So in early 2023, the UUA compensation team published new guidelines changing how to think about equitable compensation for paid staff of all UU congregations. In September, the board took on the very long and hard work to study these guidelines, and we consulted with the personnel committee and a lot of information from the UUA. And earlier this month, we submitted our recommendation to the budget committee. We've decided to close the equity gap that we that we computed in 2 steps, halfway this year, and we hope halfway next year as well. We certainly intend to, but we're talking about this budget year, so we're putting 1/2 of that equity bump in. Additionally, we already had approved a 3% COLA, cost of living adjustment, in 2024 as well. And we decided to add the equity and the COLA separately because we didn't think it was equitable to have your equity compensation bump consumed by inflation and cost of living increase. Overall, year on year, our total wages, taxes, and benefits increased 7.7%. Staff professional budgets, independently of this, they tightened their belt and reduced their expenses 35%, and you'll see that line item as well. And just as a reminder of the overall context of staff, our head count from 2 years ago has reduced 1.75 full-time equivalent members. Yeah. All right, that's that one. Thank you. Second slide for me is to talk about program budgets, new approaches. So what we want to do is, as a congregation, as a community, is to focus our giving. We're doing this through a couple of ways. One is we're really focusing on Share the Plate. So this is where the bulk of our donations to outside organizations will happen. So that's on the Sunday Share the Plate, and we'll be dedicating those donations to those outside organizations. The whole church in this way will be supporting good causes together. We are in deep collaboration with fewer groups and continue to fund those separately from Share the Plate. A good example would be what's going on right now this year with Porchlight, formerly Congregations for the Homeless. One thing that's very notable, but not a big change other than in optics, is that we're removing event registration income and expenses from both sides of the ledger in this part of the in the part of programs. So the two big ones that you might think of are CBEC, which is usually around $50,000 to $60,000 in and out each year, and Women's Perspective, which I don't know the numbers at the back on top of my head, the same, but those together and other programs that are essentially a wash because they line up year to year, are no longer in the programs part. So you'll see a big decrease year over year, but when you see it, understand that you're also seeing a big drop in the expenses side, in the income side, because we're moving that to a different category. And that's the end of that one. So I think, is Rebecca next? Or who's next?
Jerry.
Yep.
So is this the next? We did the program. And next, we're going to talk about two new reserve funds that we're putting into the budget for next year. The first is a minister's reserve fund. And over the past few years, a great deal of money has been spent for ministerial transitions. This includes search costs, consultants, and contractual obligations. All of these costs were borne by the members that just happened to be members at the time and had a significant impact on the overall operating funds available to this day. And those funds need to be available for ongoing expenses. So a different way to approach this is to have a reserve plan that saves money. We set aside a little bit of money every single year, so when these things come up, we'll have money already in the bank. And these are all inevitable expenses. And, you know, we do not want to think about our wonderful Reverend Marie Christina leaving, but hopefully in the far distant future, that not hopefully, but it will happen. Hopefully in the far distant future. If I would just read what I wrote. Okay. In the meantime, there are also other expenses. For instance, sabbaticals, possible interns, and other expenses that come up. So those have been scattered into the reserve fund. By setting aside these funds, when those needs arise, the funds will be readily available. And the costs are shared by all of us over time. And so the 2024 budget has allocated $8,000 to get this started in the next year. And you'll notice on the chart that we don't anticipate a lot of expenses in the next few years. So that's always good. And next, the second reserve fund is one that I hinted at last year when I spoke to you, and that is to start a building reserve. The building reserve is something that's been a goal of financial stewardship for many years, and we'd really like to get that up and running for 2024. Thanks to a generous donation, the fund is starting out with $24,000. Over the years, long-term repairs have also been coming out of operating funds. The operating fund can no longer support these non-operating expenses. And so we are beginning to use the endowment for major building expenses. Recently, there have been the following: $50,000 for the repair of sanctuary beams. And I believe if you walk outside to the side of the building, you'll be able to see the reason why these beams need to be repaired. The work is in progress, thank goodness. In addition to that, the fire marshal made an inspection and has determined that we have a lot of work to do on our fire suppression system. If we decide to postpone that work, I think the fire marshal can come and say, well, you can't go in that building. So that's work that needs to be done. And there's also another state requirement for a 5-year test for the elevator to make sure it can really hold all the weight that it's supposed to hold. And that's another issue that we just can't continue to postpone. Many other repairs have been deferred over the years, and as a result, it might end up costing more than what our study suggests. By adopting and following a regular plan for these expenses, we can save over the years and have sufficient funds on hand when the time comes. This plan also, same as the minister's reserve, will spread costs over all members over time, rather than needing a series of special fundraisers affecting whoever may be here when the funds are needed. We hope to expand this spreadsheet to a full 20 years in the near future using information from the 2021 update of the reserve data analysis, that's the name of the company that does our reserve study for us. And we use that information along with our actual experience of how things are going. So this spreadsheet needs a slight correction. For 2024, we're hoping to raise $160,000 to get this program started. And that is included in the budget as a capital campaign. Therefore, you will be hearing a lot from us next year. Thank you.
I'm next.
Rebecca.
I manage my own slides here. Hello, Rebecca Chatfield, Director of Finance and Operations. I use she, her pronouns. I'm here to show you some of the numbers for the actual 2024 draft budget we have in place at the moment. So first I'll show you a pie chart of the income and then a list of the same information in a list form. This is just a quick visual for you to see the general categories. And we've presented the information like this in past budget town halls. So hopefully this looks sort of familiar to you. So you can see our overall income and expenses for our balanced draft budget are at 1.3,134,1035. Of that, 62% of that income is coming from pledges and donations. Now, so that includes not only what people are pledging, but also all the non-pledged donations that come in. Sometimes we have undesignated or giving friends and things like that. Going around the circle here, we have other categories. Starting at the top left, rentals was already mentioned. We bring in $227,000 each year. So that is in this budget about 17% of our income. We do have, as Jerry talked about, a planned capital campaign. You'll see it here on the income and also on the expense side. So that's essentially a wash item in the budget because we plan to bring in $160K and also put that towards the building reserve fund. Auction, $50,000, endowment, $45,635, and then the new legacy gifts category, we're planning for $30,000. That category was lumped into non-pledge categories in the past. We're simply splitting it out so that we have a better sense of tracking for those legacy gifts. So this is the same information again, just in list form for those of you who prefer to understand numbers in this kind of way. I just like to show this basically the same thing twice so that you have a sense of how it lines up. And you can check my math there to make sure. So nothing new on this screen, just the same information presented this way. And by the way, this PowerPoint will be available for you on the website in the coming days. So if you don't want to take notes quickly about what these numbers are, you'll have access to this information going forward. All right, the next slide is the very complicated expense pie chart, has a lot more things on it. So here we go. You'll see it's the same number at the top, 1341031 for our total amount of expenses. And you can see the wages of pie slice is 47%. The three pie slices here represent total staff compensation package. So we have wages, obviously, payroll benefits, which includes health plan and retirement. We have our, and in this slide, it's also including the professional expenses in there too. And then of course the inevitable taxes that we have to pay on payroll. We do have some contract workers. I'm actually going around to I'm making a clockwise move on the chart here. Contract workers, we need folks to come in and do things for us from time to time. That includes guest ministers, musical performers, some deep cleaning on some parts of our campus that we do periodically. Program expenses, this is the category David Langrock was talking about. This is where we took out the income and expenses that were sort of wash items for our event registration. So that's why this number seems suddenly very low. But this includes all of the departmental expenses, ministry team expenses, all the money we spend on things and coordination stuff to do our ministry programs. We have software and office supplies. We have our UUA dues. We have a little bit of real estate taxes. We have some legal costs. That is a fairly big chunk. 45K of this 73 is our fair share dues. Of course, we have our very familiar friend, the mortgage loan here at 113,646. That mortgage loan will be paid off in November of 2026. So we will have that with us for a couple more years. Facilities, utilities, repairs. This is ongoing maintenance. We have a 5-acre campus. We have 4 big commercial buildings. We have an old house, the Holly House. We have just inevitable utilities costs, repairs costs, maintenance costs that happen with that. And this is a fairly big amount for our congregation compared to other UUA congregations. And we take advantage and love our beautiful campus with its wonderful grounds every single day. And then the top 2 here, Jerry talked about these, the Minister Reserve Fund, $8,000 funding, and then the capital campaign, which you saw on the income pie slice of the 160 is shown here, going right out again to that building reserve fund, which is kept separately from the operating fund. And then once again, the same information presented in a list for those of you who like to think of things in a more linear way. You can see these numbers are all the same as what was on the pie chart, and they add up to that total number at the bottom. So the next slide I'll show you is a comparison year to year. This one people have said it's helpful. So I'll show you what we have. The 2023 budget, which we're in right now, we have 10 months of data about, how we're doing for our full fiscal year 2023 budget. You can see the differences, what the changes that we've made. We're assuming some increase in membership pledges. We talked about that already. I'm just starting at the top here and working down. The other donations, those are the non-pledged donations. And this is because we split the legacy gifts out down here as a separate new item. We dropped this one a little bit, but we also are tracking trends over years to figure out what these numbers are. You can see our facilities rentals are stabilized, which is great. We do have a school in the education building now. It's a Waldorf-based curriculum homeschool enrichment program that's bringing in $7,000 a month for us. That's really helpful. We're bringing back some of our parking lot income as well for that. We do expect to have an auction in spring. My understanding it's going to be sometime in March, I think. The auction team will let you know those details. So that's pretty exciting to have that, welcome the auction back. And then Jerry also referenced the endowment fund, the endowment allocation that the operating budget receives as income into the operating budget. And you can see we've dropped it from a higher amount to, this is tracking that 3.5% endowment allocation that's in the charter. That is kind of our standard draw that we take out of that fund. And then here you can see this events and program. These were the event registrations that we've taken out that were wash with the income below. And then you can see these the capital campaign and the legacy gifts, which are the new reserve funds that we're trying to fund. And then down here at the expense side of things, you can see our wages went up. This is the equity bump and COLA being applied to our staff wages. And then, of course, it impacts how much we pay on payroll taxes. Our total payroll benefits actually went down, partly because of that 35% belt tightening we did on our professional expenses. And that was a voluntary move by the 4 SLT staff leadership team who have professional expenses as part of our compensation package. We all reduce those to help with this budget balancing process. So you can see that here. Total contract workers, we're reducing them slightly, but we're still keeping on with musical guests and guest ministers. And then here's that other one where it's quite a bit of a difference, and that you can see up here is just the difference. The 104 of income is being taken out down here in this program expenses. So you can see that sort of tracks. Our overall facilities expense is going up slightly. Our business expense has gone just a little bit down. We've tried to reduce some of our costs in the office. We have a cheaper copier. We try to buy things on sale and in bulk and that kind of thing. So really trying to tighten our belts wherever we can. Office expenses as well. Here, total capital campaign, that is the building reserve fund that we're talking about, and the reserve fund for the minister too. And then of course our perennial not so favorite line item, which is our loan on the education building. Okay, that is it for the numbers. I'm going to move us to the Q&A chat. And at this point, we'll trade off between having questions in the chat and questions from the floor. And I believe David Langrock is going to handle the microphone duties there in the sanctuary. And we'll handle the Zoom chat as well. Ryan Hill, if you're there, you can handle answering questions on the chat, and we'll trade back and forth. David, let's start with you.
Great. If I could see, I don't have any questions. Oh, wait. Okay, no, I'm just a little bit humor there. If anybody has a question, please raise a hand and I will come. I see Mike first. And when and by the way, I'm David Langrock, he, him pronouns. I forgot to mention that. And I'm going to ask folks to at least tell me your name so everybody knows.
Thank you, everybody. Mike Radau, he, him pronouns. Thank you for a couple things. Well, all of it, the information, but creating a reserve fund. My first question, and I'll ask the other ones after other people, is whether the reserve fund is specifically earmarked for building repairs and the other one for minister funds. Are any other unforeseen expenses coming out then from the endowment? That's kind of our reserve fund beyond those two earmarked areas?
Well, if things go according to plan, then no. So what we're hoping to get the reserve fund established so that if we do have major expenses for 2024, they will come out of that new reserve fund. And those funds will be separately allocated on the balance sheet, so we can always keep track of where they are and what monies are coming out of them.
Okay. I guess my question is, if they could be for anything, they don't just have to be for building or minister funds. I mean, I know in the past.
Well, the minister reserve will be used for ministerial
Yes.
purposes. The building reserve, we've set it up for building repairs $5,000 and more. I'm not sure if that answers the question, but the intent is to use it for that, for building repairs and big stuff.
Okay. Sorry, just for clarification, we used to talk about trying to have a 30 or a 60 or a 90-day runway of a general reserve, but this seems different from
Like
that.
an operating reserve? Yeah. We have no operating reserve at the moment.
Okay. Thank you.
Sadly.
Thank you. All right, I see Trevor's hand. And if I happen to know Trevor's name, I'm sorry if I don't know your name, I'll just say that person's hand.
My name is Trevor. Hi. Yeah, I wanted to add a question on the reserve funds as well. If sometime in the future there is a need for extra money and for the church and we wanted to tap into the reserve funds, what would the process be to activate funds in one or both of those reserves for the non-intended purposes?
For non-intent purposes?
Let me give an example. So if we had a situation where we need to, I can't think of a good example, but where we had an extra expense that was outside of ministerial needs, or I have a good example. Let's say 10 years down the road, we have a dip in money coming in, and we need to augment our pay to the staff to keep some of the staff. And we have a large chunk in the building reserve fund. What process, if any, is there to vote on taking money out of that reserve for operating expenses?
That is not established at the moment, but I will make a note and we can do that. I would imagine that it would be a similar process requiring board approval, such as we have with the endowment funds at present.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you. I see another one.
Hi, my name is Sarah Bergdahl. I use she, her. Oh, thank you. Short question. Could you give us an update on what's going on with the Holly House?
I cannot do that today. However, I believe there will be an update coming in the relatively near future.
Okay. Yes.
Since that was so unsatisfying. I was a little surprised to see such a, maybe I'm just being naive, but a high number of 45,000, I believe, to the UUA dues. Could you explain what those dues go for?
The UUA's main source of income is through those, through all of the, however many congregations there are. And the UUA has a program that they call Fair Share, and they ask that churches provide to the UUA their fair share, and they have their own formula for that. So it's based on the number of members that you have and what your expenses are. And that number is calculated by them. We are not legally obligated to pay that. Our policies say that it is our intent to pay fair share. And we have used the resources of the UUA. We use the UUA resources very much during the whole ministerial transition stuff. We use their advice all the time. It's the UUA's work to work on finding the equitable salaries for all of our staff. And when we need to call on the UUA, they're there for us. When we have all sorts of churchy kind of issues that need to be ironed out or that we need advice about.
They also create resources we can use for various programs that we offer.
Right, a lot of the educational programs. Yeah.
Jerry, can we take a few Zoom questions now?
Oh, all right.
Ryan, you're up. Is that okay?
That sounds great. Just
Thank you.
who coming next?
Okay, we have a few questions in the chat. The first one from Trish Hunter. What about Holly House? Are we getting any income or incurring any expenses? And she also asks if the update mentioned will be, if we'll get that update before we vote on the budget.
I can answer that about the income and expenses. We used to get some rental income from the Holly House, but those tenants vacated last year. We do have a small amount of utilities costs, under $200.
We need better sound from
Oh,
or remote people.
Just second, remote folk.
okay. They have to switch
That's better now.
the microphone. Is that better?
Can you restate the question maybe before answering it, Rebecca?
Yes. So the question, well, Ryan, go ahead. You can state the question.
Okay. Trish Hunter asked, what about Holly House? Are we getting any income or incurring any expenses? And then she added, will we get an update before we vote on the budget?
Okay, so my answer was, we used to get income from the Holly House itself. We had tenants there that paid a very modest amount of income coming in. Those tenants have vacated a while ago, but we still continue to have some utilities costs, some small utilities costs, about $200 a month that are carrying costs, and those are tracked on our statement of financial position actually each month. And then in terms of are we getting an update on Holly House before we vote on the budget? There should be some news about the Holly House coming, available. Things are moving along, and there'll be some news to share about that. So yes, there will be more information out shortly about the Holly House. Thanks. Ryan, do you want to do another one before we?
Yeah, let me do at least one more. From Tom Doe, I will read it as stated. What is the status of the endowment after the extraordinary and justifiable withdrawals of COVID times? How sustainable are endowment withdrawals going forward?
I can answer the endowment balance question, which as of our last financial statements, September 30th, the balance of endowment is $1,031,325. So just 1.03 million right now. So we definitely took some from endowment over the last 5 to 6 years. We've seen market volatility. We had a couple of kind of yucky months here this last couple months in terms of market gains, but we see it bounce around. So the market's been a little bit volatile, and when it's volatile, we can go up or down $40,000, $50,000 in a month. So we are still well above the $900,000 mark in our own rules that we abide by, that we impose upon ourselves about not going below a threshold amount for the endowment. We're still well above that at the moment. So we're holding steady with that. As for the other question, the 2024 budget is, we made an effort on the budget committee to reduce the endowment draw to what is just our standard 3.5%, which is also in the charter. So at least for 2024, that's our plan, along with these other reserve funds that we're attempting to fund. We should put less pressure on the endowment going forward. That's the plan. And if anybody else on the budget committee or financial stewardship or anybody wants to talk about that, I would yield the floor to them.
Well said.
Okay, back to the sanctuary. I saw Don. Here we go.
Hi, Don Dernberger, pronouns he and him. One thing that I noticed in the two presentations, or 2 or 3 presentations, was a 5% COLA increase for staff, and then the next one said it was a 3%, and maybe those are different years.
So the 5% was applied for 2023 over 2022, and the 3% is for 2024. And we're basing those numbers on, in the future, starting in 2024, we're basing it on the Social Security COLA numbers.
Great. I saw Doug.
Thanks, David. Hi, Doug Strombaum, he, him pronouns. I wanted to note that a few years ago, the Director of Finance had us consolidate all ministry team funding under the operating fund. And everything was explicitly budgeted. And I've heard, I think, about a change where only, like if it's a wash, then it's not in the numbers. And from my perspective, and I don't need to go into the details of my ministry team, but I would just say that I wonder if that provides the comfort to the ministry teams that their revenues, their, even though the net revenues are zero, that they're going to be funded this year, that they'll be allowed to do fundraising or they'll be allowed to expend things. So it just seems like for audibility purposes, it was presented to us that everything had to be budgeted in the operating fund. And now we have some things that are ex-operating fund, which is fine if you think it's auditable. But what my concern is from a ministry team is I don't have visibility of what's in the budget or not in the budget. So.
Thank you, Doug. Did you want to give, I don't know if Rebecca or Jerry did.
I think, yeah, go ahead, Jerry.
Okay, so the major things that we're counting as WASH are Women's Perspective Retreat and CBEC. And those have always shown in the budget as, $60,000 in, $60,000 out. So, and the same thing for Women's Perspective. In and out have balance. So they don't really have an effect on the bottom line of the budget. We have, as David talked about, we have asked the ministry teams to not include in their budgets funds for outside entities. And we want to consolidate those into Share the Plate programs rather than having a very small percentage of the members choose to donate to a particular group, whereas with Share the Plate, we all know what the money's going to be used for. We can all decide how we want to support that. Is that fair, David?
That's how I understand it, yes.
Yeah. Does that answer your question? All of the ministry teams also submitted their budgets for their expenses, like if they have programs that they want to sponsor in, I don't know, I can't go through all their, there's so many, the different teams. So we did, each ministry team has a budget that they gave to us that line items out what they want to do with their budgeted money.
Okay. Let's go to your set. You've already had one shot, so I'm going to go to somebody who hasn't had a shot yet.
Thanks, David. I have a question about the basis for the pledge income. How many members do we have this pledging time compared to the last time we pledged? And what is the increase over that time as a percentage per member?
I believe we have about 333 members at present. Okay. I do not know the number for a year ago. I believe it was a little bit more. And I don't think I quite understand the other part of your question.
Well, last time we pledged, which is a year and a half ago, right? We had a shortfall in the pledge drive of about $100,000, and the plan was to reduce the hours for Eric Lane Barnes and Amanda and others. We avoided that by going back in a second ask, which we don't often do, and raised another $100,000. When you have that 2022 number up there, which number is it? Is it the after both asks, or is it the original number?
We don't have a 2023,
sorry.
Yeah, no, that's including well, that's including the number that was voted on last December.
Okay, all right.
So, and we look,
Yeah.
so far, we look like we're going to get to that budgeted number as far as pledges
Okay.
coming in.
Okay, so to me, that second ask to raise an extra $100,000 was a one-off specific request because our new minister, we didn't want her to come in and have everybody grumpy because they had their hours reduced. So it was easy and appropriate to ask again, and that's why a bunch of us stepped up to raise that extra 100,000. We can't do that every time. So I'm just wondering how the basis for the new budget could be based on that extra 100,000 that we raised that is kind of an extraordinary source of income.
And no, I think that when we created the new January to December budget, that was based on different numbers. The extra money that you refer to was in the last budget that ran from July through June. So we had a funny time of 6 months of, you know, so we can't, it's pretty hard to compare.
Yeah, I think that extra $100,000 would have come in the year 2022.
Yeah.
And our budget for 2023, which we believe, for pledges, which we believe we're on track for, is independent of any extra, that extra 100K. It's what we've been paying in this year, in 2023.
Right, so.
And for 2024, but to your other point, we are expecting a 5% pledge increase with likely fewer pledging units. So it would be, to your other formula, slightly higher per member.
And the other question was, what are the sources of the capital fund drive? Is that just us digging deeper to fund that?
Yes.
Or are there grants?
We have.
Grants and sources apart from ourselves?
We are not, I don't think that anyone would be willing to give us a grant to start this building reserve fund. So that's going to be digging into our own pockets.
And maybe some
And the
creativity
option,
around
the other, I mean, the other side of that is if we have major building work to be done in 2024, if we have not started that, it will have to come out of endowment. And we cannot, I mean, the endowment is for the long-term survival of the congregation. And we can't, if we start using it for putting the new roof on and painting the buildings before we have to replace the siding and things like that, it's not going to last. That's the reason why we're going to, well, that's the reason why I'm hoping that we'll be able to get this building reserve plan in place so that the endowment will be more secure. Does that make sense?
Great question. Thank you.
Hey,
Anybody else
David,
before-
can I ask one from the chat?
Please.
Okay. Carrie asks if we can get a line item detail about the program portion of the budget.
The answer to that is yes. Before the December 10th congregational vote, the full detailed budget is available to any member who requests it. You can send email to finance@esuc.org. That's me. And I will cheerfully send you a PDF. We're not sending it out now because these are still draft budgets, but the full information is available to members. Most people don't need or want to see all the nitty-gritty details, but I'm happy to talk to anybody about the full details prior to the December 10th meeting.
And that's the last question in chat. So back to you, David.
Okay, great. Trevor? Oh, sorry, go Karen. We'll get to you, I promise, Trevor. Jumped in.
Hi, Karen Ramsahai, she, her. Yes, I would love to second that request for line item so you can see by program. 'Cause as a new member, I would love to see where East Shore is kind of putting their money, what programs are important here. And second, so if I don't have to email somebody to see it, that would be great. And secondly, I think in the new building fund, you said you was starting off with $24,000 already in there. So is the ask then for next year a lot lower than the 160? It's more like, so it's 160 plus the 24.
Correct. I know that chart was only up for a short while, but it shows the balance forward of 24,000. And that was from one member, so that was very generous.
Okay. Anybody else in the, okay. Trevor's my first, second. Go. We're going to go to Trevor. He's been waiting.
Yeah, let's go on. +1 to Karen, by the way, about posting the budget somewhere publicly where everyone can see. I think that's a good idea. What the question I had was about pass-through funds. You mentioned CBEC and Women's Perspective. Those will be going through, they will be passing through. Is there a place for us to see all the funds that are passed through as well as the budgeted funds?
On our financial statements every month, you can see that. One of the reasons why we're taking out the wash items also is because the calculation of the UUA fair dues is based on our operating expenses, and CBEC in particular was sort of bloating our expenses when in fact we would get money in and it would go out right out again for CBEC. So it's always kind of a dance on what we put in our budget, what shows up in our financial statements. Our budget is actually less detailed than what the eventual monthly financial statements show, because of course, any dollar that comes in and any dollar that goes out gets a spot in our accounting system and shows up in our financial statements. So that those transactions are not missing, they're just not in the budget for the budgeting purposes. Even Share the Plate is not included in the budget because that's money we don't know how much is going to come in. So we're not budgeting for it because we don't know. So we just leave it out completely, although we know there will be income and expenses for Share the Plate. But again, sort of a wash item. The money comes in, people donate, and then we write the check to the worthy organization. It goes out again. So hopefully that it's a little bit confusing sometimes what we put in, what we show, what we don't show, but every single dollar has a spot in our accounting system and is tracked, and we know exactly what we're spending and what we're bringing in at all times. And it's all in there. Nothing is missing from the transactions. It just might not be showing up in the budgeting plan for next year. I hope that makes sense.
And I can always go over line by line the CBEC budget if you want at some point. It's good. Just, all right.
Mike Radow again, thanks. I was going to ask about Share the Plate too, since you represented it as being all of us together. But if that's off budget, not a question. You mentioned 333 members, and I wonder what the impact of that is, because I think UUA has a 350 dividing line, whether we're a mid-sized budget, mid-sized church, or something else, and what might be the implications of that.
Actually, I can answer that about size, unless David, you know the size profiles probably as well as I do.
I just felt like that was one I could take.
Oh, go ahead. Go for it. Go for it.
So, the early 2023, UUA comp has changed how they measure the size of congregations, and they went from a 6-tier. If you recall, it was 6 tiers. So there was like small twos, mid two. There are now 4 tiers. And then there are 8 churches that are above 800, and they're special cases. And there's 3 things that go into the size of the congregation now. One of them is size, number of congregants, and they overlap. So we're a size C, and that goes from, oh gosh, now I don't know exactly. I think it's from 250 to 450, but size D is 400 to, yes, there's overlap. But then there's 2 other columns. One is, what is your total FTEs? How many staff members do you have? For which we are fully into a size D church. We have 7.45, which is down from 9 and change, 9.25 from a couple years ago. And it's also total operating budget. And our operating budget is at around 1.3 million, I believe, is what we saw, and that is well on the high side of size D. So we're somewhere between a size C and a size D. That was probably more complex than you wanted, but it has gotten more complex, and it's all available on the UUA comp site. That's right. Well, I think exactly. We got Evelyn.
Evelyn, she, her. So I would just like to acknowledge that what David just explained, he spent an enormous amount of time figuring out and helping the board sort through all this stuff. And it was really a lot of work, and I really appreciate it. And I think the whole group has done a wonderful job with this budget presentation. Thanks very much. Did a great job.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions, I would like to ask Grace to come up to talk about a possible bylaw amendment that we would also be voting on at our December meeting.
This pertains to budgeting, which is why I'm taking the time now. There's a bylaw called Officers and Board of Trustees that covers composition of the board, responsibilities, how people resign and are removed, meetings, quorum, executive committee, describing what it is, and then also open meetings and restricted and in-kind gifts. But it also includes a section titled Budget and Finances. And that's the one that will be presented to you to vote on. Lots of detail there, I know. Tried to get it to be readable, but I'll walk you through it. So the current bylaw, section G, for Budget and Finances, reads that the Board of Trustees shall have general charge of the finances of the church and shall maintain accountability for the expenditures of all funds. The board shall authorize and submit for approval at the annual congregational business meeting a budget for the ensuing year. The Board of Trustees may, in its administration, vary the amounts to be expended under individual headings of the budget, but may not exceed the total amount of the approved expense budget or the anticipated income, whichever is greater, without approval of the congregation. The board shall establish and enforce a policy to assure regular periodic review of financial transactions and contributions to be sure that all such transactions are proper and documented appropriately and that adequate internal control procedures are in place. And this was last amended in 2016. What's underlined in this slide is what is going to be proposed to change. The underlined sentence is the key substantive change. The others are a language change. Can you go to the next slide, Rebecca? Okay, so this, in here, the italicized wording is what has changed. The individual words shall went to will. We say will in everyday language, we don't say shall. And the word policy went to policies. But the substantive change reads in the third sentence, the board will establish and enforce collaborative methods in its policies for determining relative budget priorities. These priorities will reflect East Shore's values and covenants. This was inserted to set a tone for the budget process. There was no reference in the bylaws as to the spirit of the budgeting process. Then new wording continues. The budget will be based on anticipated availability of funds and relative priority and importance of church programs and financial needs. After the adoption of the budget, the board in office during the fiscal year covered by the budget will have the responsibility of seeing that adjustments to actual expenses and income are monitored. In the old language, you'll recall there was wording that the board in its administration of the budget. administration is kind of a fuzzy word. The board doesn't actively administer, the staff does, particularly Rebecca as DFO. And the board actually changing what I might call subheadings of the budget. You know, you have your totals, and then there's individual line items, and there are changes to those individual line items that have to occur in terms of actual expenses through the year. And when the totals are the same, everything's fine. But when the totals are different than budgeted, the board would need to weigh in. And that wasn't clear in the old language. Where I left off. The board has the authority to call for a revised budget to be approved by the congregation. We found in talking to the stakeholders that that was not clear. Policy and Governance Committee was often getting that question, who calls for a revised budget to be approved by the congregation? And the last few sentences remain the same, that the board will establish and enforce policies to assure regular periodic review of financial transactions and contributions to be sure that all the transactions are proper and documented appropriately, and that adequate internal control procedures are in place. That will be the proposed language that you will see on December 10. Meetings like this are the perfect time to ask for clarifying questions, questions of understanding. The actual congregational meeting is the best time for pros and cons to be presented, positions to be stated. Informing you and educating you at the congregational meeting is rather awkward. It's not really set up for that. These town halls and information forums that the bylaw task force offers are the best places for you to get educated and informed. And all this information will be online when you get your notification of meeting. Are there any questions at this point? Of course.
While David's getting to the question, I have a comment. The old language would probably have required, if it was carried out according to what it says in the language, would mean we'd have to have a congregational meeting practically every month. Because it says the budget may not exceed the total amount of approved expenses or anticipated income, whichever is greater, without approval of the congregation. Well, the budget every month is not going to be perfect. And so what this is changing is it's making it clear that if some major thing happens to where we have to change the year-end anticipated numbers, then we would the board would create a new budget and come back to the congregation. And so that, I think, is much better wording than the current wording in the bylaws. Speaking as your treasurer who doesn't want to come to you every month.
Awesome. And we love questions, Trevor.
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, thanks for addressing that. That was the crux of my question. So I see the main change with it is what you just said, having to go beyond the budgeted income or expenses. Is there anything within the wording of the new one where the new one says the board will monitor, but it doesn't set any upper or lower bounds of what that might be? It seems at the discretion of the board, and that could be a little fuzzy. Can we address that?
We actually had quite a depth in discussion about whether to put actual numbers in there for boundaries. And the comfort level for a specific number, maximum, minimum, was all over the map. So the Policy and Governance Committee recommends that there be a discussion, if that's desired, and it be reflected in policy, whatever the conclusion is. Because that's much easier to change. It would change over time if we had dollars amounts, so it'd be much easier to update that also. So it's possible if the congregation wants it.
As far as the monitoring goes, you have 3 entities that are looking at the financial statements on a monthly basis, which is the finance committee, or finance team, the stewardship committee, and then the board. And they look at that, they see the full financials, we ask questions, we get answers, and plus, as it's an obligation of the treasurer to also meet with the DFO on, I think it says weekly. And we do talk weekly. So there's a lot of monitoring that does go on. And so if there was something super urgent that was happening, we would know, we would be able to bring it to the board right away and then decide how to, you know, is it worthy of a new budget?
Anything from the online group?
No more questions. There was a question about, is December 10th the date of the congregational vote? And I said yes online. So if anyone there was wondering, yes, it's the 10th of December.
Okay. All right. If there's nothing else here in the sanctuary, I think we're all done. Was there going to be any particular closing words? You can slam the gavel.
Yeah. All right. Okay, with that, I think that the meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for your time and attention. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
We will have a Zoom-only presentation of the same material tomorrow night at 7 p.m. And that information is in your Thursday e-blast that you received from Nicole. So if you'd like to come back tomorrow night and see the same, we'll be here tomorrow night. Hopefully see you there.